Dark spooky season's bleatings, everyone. Ooh, yay, it's October, yay! It's always Halloween for me, but I do enjoy October because that's when I can see the difference in that the days are shorter and the nights come in faster, and they leave after a longer time now, and it's really kind of my time of year. I love October to February, I'd say favorite few months. Anyway, I have some short story recommendations for you today. I really love a good short story. It's a great way to sort of ingest a complete spooky read or scary read if you don't have much time and you just want to enjoy a whole story. So I did do a written form of this on my website, so if you've read my article there's not going to be any surprises, so if you've already read it, but I wanted to do sort of a video version of this as well because I just, I love to talk about books. Anyway, so I did put these in an order in the list, but since making the list it's kind of changed, so instead of trying to like put them in like a ranking order or anything, I'm just throwing them all out here equally as short story recommendations for you. I didn't do it on purpose because initially I was just picking my favourite short stories, but that was a really arduous task. Like, it actually turned out to not be fun trying to do that because there are, I've had to leave so many off, but for the sake of making something that's actually a consumable amount of time, had to limit myself to some number, and this is turning into a waffle. So anyway, I had caffeine immediately before doing this. So The Jaunt by Stephen King, let's open with that. That is from his collection Skeleton Crew. This sort of falls into sci-fi horror, but the sci-fi element of it is very slight, as in it's basically just the concept that works as the plot device. The story is about a type of travel that has been developed, but the thing about the travel is that the human brain, the conscious human brain, cannot take it. It's too much. It will fry you. Bad things will happen. But a family is traveling and a kid in the family gets curious about what they're missing out on when they're asleep. So you can imagine what's probably going to happen, but it's just so dark. This collection came out decades ago, so you're getting kind of like retro classic Stephen King, if that's the style of his that you like. It's just like a really fun idea that he threw in and did something horrible with it, so classic Stephen King. Next, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So I love this story, and I know it's obviously widely acclaimed. I mean, it's Shirley Jackson, it's not like no one's ever heard of this, but in sort of like modern horror book conversations and circles, I don't really see it brought up a lot, and I feel like this was the jumping off point for like so much of what's really popular and has been popular for decades, in that dystopian kind of setting where humanity is now so effed up that they're willing to just pick people at random and throw them to the wolves. So obviously things like the Hunger Games, Battle Royale, even stuff like The Running Man and The Long Walk, actually. So I just feel like Shirley Jackson was like a jumping off point. Now, maybe she didn't invent this concept, this might have been done before, but Shirley Jackson's story, The Lottery, is the earliest one that I've read with this kind of concept. So this is just set in a little town. We just get a little sneak peek about one element of how society's running. There's a lottery, everyone's names are thrown into a hat, they pick one, and you do not want to be the person picked, let's just say that. It's a great work of dread, and it like piques your curiosity, but then you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to know what's going on here. So yeah, it's really good. It's a little bit mysterious. It's just a great story. A little bit of indie horror for you next. There is a story called Meat by Kristin Kirby, and it was in an anthology called Negative Space 2 from Dark Peninsula Press, and I loved it. It was right up my street. So this is like a post-apocalypse, or maybe they're currently in the apocalypse, I can't quite remember, but basically food is scarce, and the heaviest person in any given group might become the meal. And by heaviest, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a big person, it's just they're going to be the biggest person of that particular group, and then they will cease being called by their name and be referred to as the meat. And I just loved it. It's the concept is bloody horrible, obviously. Can you imagine any circumstance in which you're reduced to going to cannibalism to survive? Like, I can't, like, that is so psychologically messed up and damaging and scarring. But then also imagine being the person who like is given the honor of being the meat. I just love it. Like, I think about this story, it was just such a good idea. It's simple, it's not like an overly complicated, complex, convoluted story or anything like that. It's a very simple concept that we're going with, but it was just really entertaining. And I don't know what it says about me that I'm smiling so much about a story like that, but I just really enjoyed it. Next, some more indie horror. This is The Old Church by Gary McMahon. I don't know why I say his name like that. I think it every time I see his name, that's how I hear it in my head. It's from his short story collection, This Isn't Anywhere You Know, from Black Shuck Books. It's so good. I can't really tell you anything about this, but this is about a guy who goes to a christening, and I can't tell you anything else apart from that. But it's really great, and yeah, I was delighted. Next, something from Adam Nevill, obviously. Now, it's really hard for me to pick because I really love Weird and Other Derelictions, the collection. I'm in the camp of I absolutely love it, and I think it's a work of genius, and I can picture every story in that because I can remember when I was reading it, like what my mind was doing. It really got my imagination going, that book. But the story of his that keeps freaking me out, and I read it years ago, and it just keeps lurking around and coming back up all the time, is Yellow Teeth from Some Will Not Sleep, the collection. It's, oh my god. So Adam's got a really great talent for setting everything in the real world with like really relatable people and settings and locations that you can picture easily, or you've been there, and then he puts something horribly otherworldly in it, infests the world that we know with some sort of horrible horror. And Yellow Teeth is about a guy with the most relatable circumstances where he gets a flatmate and this guy is just a pig. It's supposed to be temporary, but this guy doesn't look like he's going anywhere, and he's a slob, he's messy, he's dirty, he smells, he doesn't pick up after himself, and not only that, but he just seems to leave everything grimy. And I was just reading this with this increasingly intense sort of like anxiety about like, because I a lot of the people I've lived with were great to live with, but I have lived with people that drove me absolutely nuts for like, you don't expect people to pick up after you, but for God's sake, pick up your own stuff. So this was making me angry as I was reading it. I just felt so many emotions. And then, as always with an Adam Nevill story, I didn't know what the sting in the tail was going to be, but there always is one. It did not disappoint. All right, another toothy title for the next one. It's Pulling Teeth by Kit Power, and it's from Voices, which is one of the Shadows books from Black Shuck Books. So as you all know, I think that Kit Power might be the greatest indie author ever in the world, and I love this story. This is another one, I read it years ago. It keeps coming back around. I loved this story so much, and it feels, I've described it as, it's like the most Stephen King story that isn't written by Stephen King that you'll ever read. So if you're a King fan, I think you'd actually really love Kit's writing in general. Pulling Teeth is about someone who goes to an institution as a kid, and he's there a very long time, and this institution is very similar to The Shop, like from the Stephen King universe, the guys from Firestarter, like that kind of institution where they've collected people that are valuable because they've got strange abilities, let's say, and this poor guy's been being used this whole time. The concept is sort of like supernatural, paranormal, and you think that you're getting the whole story like as soon as you go in, but you're not, and it gets much darker than you think. So it ends really well too. It's such a great ending. So yes, Pulling Teeth by Kit Power. Next, let's go back to some traditional publishing, shall we? Clive Barker's I always say it wrong. The Yattering of Jack from Books of Blood Volume 1. It's so good. It's about a guy who, unfortunately, there's a demonic presence in his house. I can't tell you anything about that more than that without spoiling why this story is so great and so different to other stories of this kind, but it's in a very dark way. It's like kind of funny, and it's Clive Barker. I mean, your classic brilliant Clive Barker writing. So yeah, I can't recommend that enough. That one is my favorite short story of all time. So like everything else on this list is kind of like moved around and whatever, but I would rank that as like my favorite short story at the moment. It could change. Next up, we've got Fourth Call by Ramsey Campbell, which was in an outstanding anthology from PS Publishing called Fearful Implications. This is a seasonal horror tale. It's very, very creepy. Seasonal as in Christmas seasonal. The whole anthology isn't, by the way, just Ramsey's story, if I remember correctly. Now, normally, I'm not a huge fan of Christmas horror for some reason. I think it's because there are so many Christmas horror tropes, you know, like Evil Santa, and I'm not huge for like ghost stories either, and there's loads of ghost stories around Christmas. Not that I actually really enjoy them when I read them, it's just not what I go to pick up first, if that makes sense. Oh, the little sidebar, everyone. There is one exception to the Evil Santa rule, and I have to tell you about it real fast because I've just thought of it, but John McNee wrote a novel called Hail Santa, and it is the greatest seasonal horror story I've ever read. It was so much fun. There was so much visceral horror, gore and stuff in it, and violence, but the concept was really good. I just wanted to throw that out. I'll probably talk about that closer to Christmas, but I've already talked about it here, but I just wanted to throw that out while we're talking about Christmas horror. Back to the main topic. So, The Fourth Call by Ramsey Campbell is a seasonal horror tale about a little village or town. I think it's a little village, and there is a Christmas tradition that everyone, you know, knows about, everyone's aware. There's a certain way that things have to go, okay? And if you deviate from how it's supposed to go, then something bad's gonna happen. It was really creepy. Ramsey Campbell has just such an ability, and I can't put my finger on what it is about his writing, which is very annoying because I would love to be more like him, but he's just got this ability to really sew in these creepy vibes that you get when you're reading. I love to feel uneasy when I'm reading, and yeah, this story like did not disappoint. It was so good, and the imagery it conjured as well, it was really unsettling. Next, let's go back a little bit, not too far in time, but a little far, to The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. It's basically like the Bluebeard story, but it's horrible. So this guy, you know, has a wife. She's allowed to go anywhere she wants in this castle, apart from this one particular chamber. And of course, she gets curious about the chamber and she wants to know what's in there. As with all stories of this ilk, people wish that they didn't go snooping. The writing itself is gorgeous, and it's very atmospheric as well. Really puts you in the shoes of this lady that we're following, and this is sort of an analogy for abuse. And normally I don't, you know, I do enjoy reading that kind of fiction, but there's something about the way that this is sewn in with the old fairy tale and like the extra horror elements that she's put in that really makes it so impactful and interesting. Little indie horror for you again next. I've bleated on about this one so much, so I won't dwell on it too much here, but it's Just a Note from Illusions of Isolation by Brennan LaFaro, which was published by French Press Publishing. Oh my god, God's sake. Just realised I've been forgetting to show you the book covers. Well, it's too late now. Just a Note by Brennan LaFaro from Illusions of Isolation from French Press Publishing. So this is a very, 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 very strong collection in my opinion. Now, disclaimer, if you've seen me mention this before, you'll already know this, but I did proofread this because I work for Stephen, who runs Fresh Press Publishing, so I did take a pass at this, so I just want to mention my involvement so it doesn't just look like I'm sneaking stuff that I've been involved in. But I don't profit from this book. I wasn't, you know, I don't get royalties or anything like that. So yeah, there's really strong stories in here. My favourite is Just a Note because the formatting is really interesting, and I was actually very scared reading it. It's about a mother and son who miss each other all the time. They live together and they've got different shifts, so they never really see each other, but they communicate, and it's so sweet, like with these little notes they leave each other, just sort of like updating each other on their day and asking questions and things like that. And I just thought that was really sort of like so wholesome and nice. And then I remembered it's a horror story. There appears to be something else in the house with them, and you get increasingly stressed about that as the letters get increasingly nervous. I love it when authors play with traditional storytelling format and do something a little bit different, a little bit more interesting than just general prose, even though I love general prose, but you know, it's nice to mix it up once in a while. There is, I'm going to throw another story recommendation while we're here into this as well. There is another one that was a very, very close second place for me. And Then You Smiled for a Second is the story title. That's a home invasion story, but oh my god, I have never seen what Brennan does in this story towards the end. I have never seen that in a home invasion story in my life, and it was great. So yeah, I recommend I recommend all of these collections and anthologies just overall, but yeah, especially for those two stories. The Moth by Rachel Knightley from Twisted Branches from Blackshark Books again. And I cheated a little bit because this is The Moth Part 1 and The Moth Part 2. I never look at a table of contents when I pick up a collection, so The Moth Part 2 was a very nice surprise because I thought the story had ended. It hadn't, and it was great. On the horror scale, this is very light on what you would think of as like traditional horror elements, so there's no extreme violence, although no blood and guts, that kind of stuff, no ghosts running around, floating around, whatever, however it is that they like to go around. But it's increasingly disturbing the more you think about it, if that makes sense. So we've got a woman who's in a somewhat illicit relationship with an older man who's a uni tutor, and it's really just very easy to dislike this guy, but I don't know if anyone deserves his fate. What would I class this under? I can't really tell you anything more without ruining it for you. What would I put this under? In a very weird sort of abstract way, it's kind of body horror. Next, Farewell to Flesh by Mocha Pennington, which was in Dark Murmurs from Silent House Press. This is about a trans woman who she just wants to be accepted and accept herself, and she's got an idea of what she needs to be physically for that to happen, and unfortunately she finds a surgeon and this surgeon isn't reputable. This isn't a good dude, and you're just watching her go along with her life, wishing her the best and thinking, oh god, no, just cut ties with this, don't go with this man, don't go to this man. It's so heart-wrenching, and obviously the concept is absolutely bloody horrific. It is horrific what's going on, but it's thought-provoking, and also it made me feel like a kinship with just all my fellow people out there. This character is so relatable, one of the most relatable characters I've ever read, in that human pain is quite universal, and we all have our unique things that cause it and the way it affects us and everything, but pain is something that we all experience, like emotional pain, and it's translated so well without being really ham-fisted or anything. And is the phrase ham-fisted or is it hand-fisted? Okay, completely different feel for the next one. Lock and Key by Nat Whiston from the Fearforge Winter Quarter anthology from Horrorsmith Publishing. Oh god, what a great story. So if like I made the Stephen King comparison with the Kit Power story, this is very Clive Barkery to me. Like, this is something that could fit in Books of Blood. This is about a guy who's plagued by horrible nightmares. He can't stand them anymore, you guys. He wants the bad dreams to stop, and he finds somebody that has a very unconventional approach, like a solution to this, and I just had no idea where this story was going, and I don't want to like tell you anything more about it, because the real joy of this story is where it goes, and I'm going to spoil it for you. But oh my god, it was so satisfying, and so just like, oh, it was very Books of Blood. All right, completely different tone on the next one. This is The Letter by Lydia Prime from We're Not Ourselves Today, which is a really brilliant short story collection that she co-wrote with Jill Girardi, who is also incredible. But this was my favourite story in this collection, and probably my favourite story from Lydia so far. I think she's great. It's so good. So this is you're gonna think I'm so demented when I explain this, because I'm laughing, but this is about a pregnant lady who's, you know, nesting, doing a little her home stuff, and then she has a visitor she doesn't want, a visitor she wasn't expecting, but apparently it's a solicited visitor, and it goes to horrendous places. But I'm just laughing because there's kind of a punchline to this one, and it was so funny, and it was only made funnier by the absolute carnage that preceded it. So I really recommend that one. Like if you love your horror but like with some humor thrown in, not too heavy-handed with the humor. It wasn't, I wouldn't put this in spoof territory or anything like that, but it really made me laugh. Last on the list, Phil Sloman's Death's VO from No Happily Ever After, which is his short story collection. We'll never look at an ice cream truck the same, and not for the reasons that you might assume with this being horror and everything, that it's, oh my god, it's so messed up. And the only time that I have ever felt the way I felt reading this story is so when I read Salem's Lot by Stephen King, I felt so scared, and it was like a very slow build-up of like just I was getting more creeped and creeped out. I think maybe the atmosphere he created with the town and everything like really got to me, like gone into my head, like wormed its way right into my head and my psyche, and I was really scared. The only other time that I have felt that particular type of like scared was when I was reading One for the Road by Stephen King, which is a Salem's Lot short story tie-in, and I felt the same way then. And I never again thought I'd read anything that elicited that very unique sort of fear I was feeling. And then I read this story, The Death's VO, and I felt exactly the same way. I can't tell you anything about it, because if I tell you what I love about it, it'll spoil it. But it's dark. You think it's one thing, maybe it's something else. And yeah, just very perfectly executed. I really loved it. So there you go. 15 short story recommendations for spooky season. I hope I've given you a good variety here, and I hope there's stuff for you to like. And if you've read any of these and you want to like chat about them in the comments, I would really love it if you did that, so that I can talk more about them. Do love a good chat in the comments with people. So that's about it for this video. I hope you have a lovely spooky season. I hope you're reading and watching. Hold on, sorry, 1 second. What? I'm talking. Very rude. Very rude. What? Oh. Really sorry about this, everyone. Barry is insisting that if you watch my videos and you haven't already, that you consider subscribing. It's not me, it's Barry. Apparently there's going to be dire consequences if you don't, so, what? We couldn't possibly do that. Who would clean up the mess? Please.